We knock on the door. They open the door. The girl starts screaming. Thank goodness the horse we brought was probably in his older age and maybe hard of hearing, because the girls just screamed when they saw this horse on their doorstep. And we said, we're here. We're going to give you this day of fun that you missed out on.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate, here for another inspiring episode. If you're new here, please make sure that you subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl, REVO. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find all of our podcast episodes, our original documentary series, our social media links, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com. On this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I welcome Molly Reeser, founder of Camp Casey. Camp Casey is an incredible organization that provides horseback riding programs and life-changing experiences for children with cancer, rare blood disorders, and other life-threatening illnesses and their families. Casey talks about all the programs that they do, but they do everything from horsey house calls, where they actually take a horse and an entire experience to the children's home, to cowboy campouts, where they provide an all-inclusive weekend getaway for families to a dude ranch. They do Lone Star getaways and outlaw outings, so much stuff, so many incredible programs, and I can't wait for Molly to share all of them with you. Molly has an inspiring life story, and the story of how Camp Casey came to be will blow you away. Molly was literally mucking horse stalls for work while she was in college and met this feisty little girl, Casey, who would go to ride horses where Molly worked. Casey had cancer, and Molly became very quick friends with Casey. And when she passed away, Molly decided that she wanted to do something to honor Casey's life and to help other kids with life-threatening illnesses. But little did Molly know that Camp Casey would turn into her life's mission. Molly shares her life story, the story of Casey Foote. She talks about how Camp Casey came to be, how their work has evolved through the years, the beautiful stories of the kids that they've helped through their work. It will bring you to tears. It will make you laugh. There's so many different amazing stories that she shares and so much more. This episode is a powerful one that I'm so excited to share with you. So without further ado, here's Molly. Molly, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Howdy. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on to talk about Camp Casey and your own life story. But before we get into Camp Casey, I would love to rewind and share a little bit with our listeners about your life and your upbringing, who you are and where you're from. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. It's not too exciting. I grew up in suburbia. I grew up in Farmington Hills, which is a suburb of Detroit. And I had a very normal childhood. I ended up graduating high school and going to Michigan State University. And that's really where my career, I didn't know it, but that was where my career was put into motion. And that is what led me to where we are today.
Yeah.
So I really don't have too much of a backstory. I did grow up riding horses. So I had that experience as a student, as a horse camp enthusiast, as a camp counselor where I worked as a teenager. So, but a pretty typical American life. I don't think that there was anything too exciting or outlandish about my upbringing.
Well, when you were at Michigan State, you started mucking horse stalls, and that's actually where you met Casey Foote. What can you tell me about Casey?
Sure. So, Casey was a spark plug personality little girl. So I will say, in relation to my own life, Casey reminded me of myself as a child. Really outgoing, very, now you're supposed to call bossy people leaders. And that was Casey. She was really sarcastic and funny and really didn't care what anybody thought of her. She was her own person. And I related a lot to Casey because I saw a lot of myself as this somewhat obnoxious, outgoing, take nothing from nobody kind of gal. So, but it was actually when I was mucking horse stalls at Michigan. It was a farm right outside of Michigan State that I started working there just for some part-time money to be able to have some spending cash while going to MSU. And Casey would come in on a weekly basis just to interact with the horses that were on this farm. It was an English show barn. So it was, if anybody who's listening is familiar with the equestrian world, it was a little bit of a stuffier environment. And the horses that were boarded there were very expensive. The folks who were taking riding lessons were paying a lot of money for their instruction. And Casey was this little girl who stumbled upon the barn because a friend of hers knew of the barn, or her mom used to ride there. And she came in like a bat out of hell and just broke the mold and broke the environment that this stuffy English barn offered. She was just really outgoing and funny and sarcastic. That is the best way to describe Casey. She was an animal lover through and through. And that is also how we connected, because one of my most fond memories of Casey is that she would interrupt the very expensive horseback riding lessons that were taking place and run into the riding arena and rescue these little baby birds that had fallen from the barn rafters. And probably in any other situation, these, it's kind of survival of the fittest, and these little baby birds probably would not have made it. But Casey was just hell-bent on saving these little baby birds. And she would, of course, bring them to the sucker, which was me. And the two of us together had this mission to save these baby birds. And so we would find a shoebox, put the baby birds in the shoebox. I promised to take them home and nurture them back to health, which I truly tried to do. I remember I would feed them wet cat food, and my roommates in college were just disgusted by the stink of our apartments. I don't think any of the birds made it. They all perished, but I didn't tell Casey that. I had like a little birdie graveyard in East Lansing in my apartment complex, but I loved her heart and her compassion. And as a young person, I was 18 or 19 years old when we met, and I didn't really ever have exposure to seeing a child who was sick. So that was something that stood out about Casey. She was going through treatment for bone and brain cancer. So she was a little 10-year-old girl who didn't have any of her hair. Her face was bloated from the treatment drugs that she was on. And she was this child who was struggling through illness. Again, I'm noticing her trying to save the lives of another creature. And it was just something that really touched me and made me want to continue our friendship.
And you became fast friends, as you mentioned, the two of you. And unfortunately, 2 years after you guys met, Casey died of cancer. But the positive side is that's not where her story ends, because
Right.
she truly was the catalyst for Camp Casey. So talk to me about that. Casey, unfortunately, passing away. And what was the spark moment where you decided to do something to honor her and honor her life?
So I only knew Casey a short time, as you said. We met when she was about 10. And again, I think I was a freshman in college at this time. And we became friends over the animals, and she loved horses, and she was just an animal fanatic, which I just very much related to. She would come very regularly. It was evident that she was sick, but then there were times where weeks would go by and she would not visit. And so we all knew, the folks who were working at the barn or riding at the barn or boarding at this particular barn, we all knew that she was gone, not because she didn't want to be there, but because she couldn't be there. She either had a surgery that she was undergoing, or her treatment schedule was so severe that she could not be around the horses because she had chemo. And then she became coming less and less. And then she did eventually pass away. And she was only 12 years old when she died. And obviously everybody was just devastated by this. It was awful to know that a child who was so young and full of life and had so much ahead of her and had so much compassion in her heart was no longer there. It really left the world with a giant hole. And the feeling at the barn was different. And like I said, she came into this environment that was a little bit it wasn't for kids. It wasn't a kid-friendly environment. And she made it that. She didn't care. She definitely sat herself at the table with all of these wealthy equestrians who had very expensive horses, and she interrupted their riding lessons to do what she wanted to do. And if anybody tried to feel sorry for her for what she was going through, she would tell you to stop the waterworks. I mean, she was a very bright, sarcastic, funny little girl. So when her absence was there, it felt like something was missing, and all of us were very sad. Collectively, everybody who was a part of this barn community wanted to do something to honor her memory. And different ideas got thrown about. I remember we were all standing in the little kitchen area, and somebody said, "Oh, we should buy a park bench, and we could put a plaque, and it could say, in memory of Casey," or we could plant a tree, or let's walk and try to raise money for childhood cancer research. And I remember hearing all of these different ideas being floated about and thinking, that's boring, that's terrible, Casey would hate that. And I stayed quiet, but remember thinking that is not how her life should be represented. As beautiful as a tree is, that's not Casey. We should be doing something, not buying something. So because like Casey, I too am a leader, I approached the owners of the barn and I said, I have an idea for how we can honor Casey's memory in a way that isn't permanent. It's a one-time event. It's not a tree. It's not buying a park bench that will stay here forever, but it will be something that could have a lasting impact. And I had suggested that, I don't even know that I asked permission. I probably just said, I'm going to be doing this. The plan was that I would go to the hospital where Casey received treatment, which is Sparrow Hospital in Lansing. And I would put up flyers that promoted a family fun day at a barn for children who were also receiving cancer treatment at this particular facility. The idea was it was going to be a one-day event, and we would call it Camp Casey. And the children could come with their siblings, because we also saw how Casey would bring her brother along and her family would be there and experience the joy that she was able to have vicariously through her. And so it was going to be a family event. So I had asked the owners of the barn if I could just basically take over their place for one Saturday in June. And they obliged. And I went to the hospital and I did just that. I put up flyers. I started schmoozing with some of the nurses there. And I told them about this idea. I mean, at this point, I'm a sophomore in college. So I must have been not even 20. And it's just funny looking back on this now, because this is not how we go about recruiting our campers these days. But I moved and I shaped and I did what I needed to do to try to promote that there was going to be a family fun day at this farm called Camp Casey. It was a one-time event and it was going to be spectacular. And I asked some of my friends from school to come and volunteer. And we put little stations together. We had a craft station and a horse treat making station and horseback rides, of course. We had 5 horses. The idea was that we would gather 20 children and rotate them from different stations. And it was going to just be this fabulous day that would honor Casey's life in a meaningful way. And the day came and we had about 80 attendees. And I remember thinking like, geez, I planned this for 20 people and there's so many more people than we expected. I put about $200 on the emergency credit card that my parents had given me for emergencies while I went to school. And I remember on that, I think I had bought some pizzas and arts and crafts supplies. And we had this phenomenal day. We had children and their siblings and their parents and some grandparents came out, and they all had so much fun because we had them riding and making crafts and making horse treats and playing games. And we had all these goodie bags for them. And it was just a truly special day for everybody, for the children who were benefiting from it, from their families and their parents who were seeing how much fun they were having. The volunteers felt so good about it. The owners of the barn and the whole barn community felt like, wow, this is so wonderful. And we felt we had appropriately honored Casey's life. And it was exceeded the expectations that I had. And now I could move on and I could complete my degree and go get a very high paying job after I graduate. I mean, I was still on the course of this was a one-time gig. But I really do think that, as is currently, Camp Casey is a very guided organization. We have a lot of angels that look out for us. And that was the case then too. Casey, I believe, had other plans for this one-time event, because about a week after this Camp Casey Day took place, I received a letter from a little boy who was in attendance. He was 5 years old, and he was also in treatment for brain cancer, which is the same treatment that Casey had undergone. And the letter said, "Thank you for the best day of my life." And there was a picture he drew of him and his horse. And I just remember being so touched by that and thinking, wow, that was not that hard to do. What if we did this on a monthly basis? What if we did this regularly? And this could actually have that kind of impact on not only a child like this little boy, David, but on lots of children. And so again, I approached the barn owners, and I don't know how much, of a request it was, or if it was just, hey, I'm going to be doing this. And I knew to strike while the iron was hot, because everybody was feeling that high from what a wonderful experience we all had putting on Camp Casey. So I ran with it and I said, okay, we did this in June. Can we do it again in July? And we did it again in August. And we continued having these one-day events until I graduated. So that was my sophomore year. So for the next 2 years, I had held one-day horseback riding events at this barn, and we called them Camp Casey. After that, I was supposed to graduate, and I was supposed to get a real job and have health benefits and a 401k and all of those things that, the parents that, raised me in suburbia expected of me. So I remember graduating and just having that, like, who moved my cheese moment that all recent graduates face, where I was like, what do I do with my life? I have no passion. I have no purpose. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. There's no next step here. Do I go to law school? What do I do? And I started digging deep and thinking, like, what is it that makes me feel at my best? Where do I feel most satisfied? And it kept coming back to Camp Casey. It kept coming back to the feeling that I had when one of these events that I put so much work into. And at this point, I had gotten a little bit better about not loading my parents' emergency credit card up. I would actually speak to the pizza companies and ask for them to donate. And I'd go to Joann Fabrics and see if they could donate any craft supplies. And so it became a little bit more of some interworkings of the beg, borrow, steal mentality that you have to run a nonprofit organization. But I didn't even know what a nonprofit really was, to be honest. And I certainly did not see myself in a role as an executive director of a nonprofit. I thought I would be in the corporate world, or a lawyer, or doing something where I was, financially successful. So but I knew that I didn't really want to go that route. And there was something deep down that told me that I needed to at least try to see if Camp Casey could turn into something bigger. So I did the scariest thing that I've ever done in my life, which was sit my parents down at PF Chang's and say, I appreciate all of the support you've given me over the last 4 years. And I'm so grateful that I was able to have this education, but I am going to take 1 year and waitress. And I'm going to see if I can turn Camp Casey into something. And I remember that deafening silence in the room. I felt like all of PF Chang's just stood still and stared at me when I gave my parents this news that I was going to be doing this, because they were not supportive of this. And by the way, if you are to call my mom or dad, they'll deny that this ever happened. But I remember this day. It was like, check, please. I mean, they were not happy to hear that my plan upon graduating was to become a waitress. But that was truly what in my heart was telling me, it's now or never. I knew that had I gone to law school, or I had gotten a conventional job and started obtaining the bills to maintain a lifestyle that would come with, that I would never be able to take this chance. You're only a broke college kid, for a certain period of your life. And so I knew that it was now or never to try this. And if it failed, oh, well, I lost 1 year of not being in corporate America. So I did it, even though I was not supported and it was not a popular decision I was making. And I wasn't it wasn't the most, I wasn't proud to tell my friends that after graduating, as they're going off to their high paying jobs and their higher education, that I was going to be working at Champs, but I did it. And it was a 1-year plan.
Watch In Tandem on One Girl Revolution's website or on our YouTube page. In Tandem is the inspiring story of Caitlin Cullen and her restaurant in Milwaukee, The Tandem. The Tandem does more than just serve food. The Tandem is a family, a community of support for everyone. The Tandem hires people that often no one else will hire, gives them an opportunity, trains them, and helps them find their way in this world. The Tandem is a support system for everyone who walks through their doors. But when COVID hit in March 2020, the Tandem story became even more inspiring. The Tandem closed their doors to customers and began solely feeding people in need during a time when so many people were struggling. Caitlin and the Tandem community fed over 115,000 people during the first year of the pandemic. Absolutely incredible. Watch and share In Tandem today on our website at onegirlrevolution.com.
And in that 1 year, I surrounded myself with others who were in the nonprofit world. I called meetings with just about anybody who would take a meeting with me. It's pretty incredible to know that you can basically just email or call anybody and ask to meet with them, and how many will actually agree to take meetings with you. It was probably like, who did I just meet with as I'm leaving very successful professionals. But I just hustled. And that 1 year became 6 years, I will say, of not only waitressing, but I taught fitness and I worked banquets and there was no Uber at the time, but if there was an Uber or a shipped shopper kind of situation, I would have done it because I was just hustling whatever gig job I could take so that at the end of my shift, I could come home and work toward building Camp Casey. I did it. And again, for those years, I don't want to say it was embarrassing, but it was quite humbling to be among my peers who had been now in the workforce for quite a few years and were driving nicer cars than I was driving and living in nicer apartments than I was living in. But I was truly happy doing this. It was a lot of fun. And I got the experience that I needed to do what I'm doing now. So that was about 6 years that I volunteered my time working to build Camp Casey. And in this time, the organization, we became a nonprofit 501c3. We built a board of directors. We started leveraging very passionate volunteers, and our organization grew. We first started having one-day events that looked very similar to what Camp Casey started as. But what started presenting itself was that to gather a group of 20 immunocompromised children at the same time, at the same place, was very hard. Now that the whole world has gone through a pandemic, we all understand what it means to be immunocompromised. This is a population that Camp Casey has been serving since day one. So while Casey was an angel looking over the first ever Camp Casey and its attendance was robust, that was not always the case. Sometimes we would plan these very extravagant days where we had so many folks donating their time and their services and their pizza and their crafts and their barn, and only 9 children of the 20 we had invited would show up. And it wasn't because the other 11 didn't want to be there. It was because they couldn't be there because they had received chemo the week before and they were immunocompromised, and being around something as dirty as a horse and around other children would not be safe. So that continued to be a problem that we were searching for a solution for. And it was at one particular Camp Casey one-day event that ended up completely changing the trajectory of what our services became. And that was when we were in Lansing. And during this time, we started not only operating out of the barn where Camp Casey started, but out of different barns. So we were at a different barn every weekend, providing a one-day camp experience for children locally to that area. So we would go to Battle Creek, we would go to Ann Arbor, we would go to Detroit. And in this particular Camp Casey Day, it was in Lansing. And it was again, a day that was intended to invite 20 campers to enjoy. And our attendance was not full. And in the group that ended up showing up, we had one little girl who was 4 years old and her sister who was 7. But the 4-year-old Kelly who was the qualifying camper. She had a cancer called rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a cancer of a soft tissue. It's a highly malignant, fast-growing cancer. She ended up having this cancer in her eye. So here's this little 4-year-old who was actually in active treatment, which means that she had chemo very recently. And at this time, we always had a medical professional with us volunteering their time to make sure that all of our children were in a good position to be around the dirty stuff like horses. And at this particular day, the family really wanted to be there. The children were so much looking forward to going horseback riding. And they ended up coming during the time that she was immunocompromised, that she probably should not have been going, but they pushed it. And they really were hoping that cancer would, not again prevent the family from having a day of normalcy. And about an hour into the day, Kelly is on the horse and she gets a nosebleed, which if you have children or have been around children, they pick their noses, they get nosebleeds. It's no big deal. You tell them to stick some tissue up there, hold their nose, they're fine. But for Kelly, who was immunocompromised, her blood counts were low, a nosebleed is serious. It could mean that her blood is not clotting. And in this event, that was what was going on. She had to immediately dismount the horse. We had to send her family to the nearest hospital where they had to spend the day, and she had to have a blood transfusion. And it was a terrible day for the family. This was their normalcy, though. This is what our families go through.
Right.
I just remember thinking we did a disservice. Here we are trying to do something wonderful for this family. And once again, cancer is coming in to remind them that you don't get to have fun. And she was 4 and her sister is 7. And we're telling them the minute they get in that saddle, nope, you have to go to the hospital now for another day of getting poked and prodded and, just the terrifying difficulties that these children have to go through. And that was in late August. And I remember thinking okay, well, we'll just invite her to the next one. But because of her treatment schedule, she would not be able to come again to a day that we had planned for that summer. So I kept in touch with the mom and I said, we just have to do something special for your girls. We cannot let another year go by. And to be honest, and I'll let you know that Kelly is now in her 20s and doing great. And so is her sister. And we keep in touch with them. So she is a cancer survivor. But at the time, we didn't know the severity of her illness and if she would be around for next summer's events. And if that happened, what is to say that nosebleed would not happen again? Because the days were set and we could not tailor those days to the children's treatment schedules. So I kept in touch with the mom and I said, okay, I have a wild idea. Let's work with your treatment schedule. And when she is in a stable place, why don't we bring a horse to you? I had a friend, Ashley, who had a truck and a trailer. And my other friend, Madison, had a horse that was just like a puppy dog that I knew would be very well behaved for this kind of event. And we did it. We loaded up this horse. We drove to Kelly and Lindsay's house. We're in the total suburbs at this point. We knock on the door. They open the door. The girls start screaming. Thank goodness the horse we brought was probably in his older age and maybe hard of hearing, because the girls just screamed when they saw this horse on their doorstep. And we said, we're here. We're going to give you this day of fun that you missed out on. And so we did everything at their home that we would have done at the day of the Camp Casey that they missed out on. We had a craft station set up specifically for them. We had pizza delivered. We had games. We brought a day of horse camp to these children who, in their situation, were unable to go away to camp. And during this time, we're somewhere between the swing set and the sidewalk. And we're walking around the neighborhood and the girls are just feeling so cool because all the neighbors are slowing down and honking their horns and waving. And this man drives by and he rolls down the window and he knew the family because he lived in the neighborhood. And he said, what is this? What is going on? And I said, we're Camp Casey, and this is a horsey house call. And it was like out of thin air, and he said, oh, is that your organization? This is what you do? I said, no, this isn't what we do, but this is what we would do if we were able to do this, if we had the resources to do this. Because in my mind at this time, as I'm working so hard and hustling to build this organization, I'm realizing that every single person that you have the chance to talk to brings about an opportunity of maybe what they could offer to this organization. And that's true to this day. There's not a single person I speak to that I don't look at and talk to and think, how can I get you involved? What can you offer this world, if not Camp Casey? So at this point, I'm schmoozing this gentleman who's driving by, and he hands me his business card and he says, I love this, and I would like to talk to you more about this. And this entire time, my wheels are turning. I'm thinking, this is it. This is the model that we should be running after. Because for years now, we have been struggling to figure out, how do we serve this immunocompromised population all at the same place, all at the same time, while they're all going through different treatment schedules. It just wasn't working. But when it worked beautifully. So we knew that there was a need, and we knew that this was such an important, impacting, powerful program that we could put on, but there was a disconnect. And this Kelly's Nosebleed truly launched something that made a lot of sense. So we concluded that day. I remember like it was yesterday, as we're leaving, we're putting the horse back in the trailer, and Lindsay, the 7-year-old, says, you can come back anytime you'd like, and you can bring any horse. It doesn't need to be that one. So I was thinking, oh no, I can never see this family again without having a horse with me. So
I'm just thinking about all the children that you're working with and how magical that must be for them to have a horse show up at their house. Like even the girls that you shared about, like freaking out and knowing that this horse is there for them, just for them. And knowing all the difficulties that they're going through, and just like, what a beautiful, beautiful mission you guys have.
Oh, it's the best. And every reaction is different. And that is something that we try to prepare our volunteers for. There's really no preparing for your first horsey house call as volunteer, because it is emotional and it's beautiful and it's fun and it's exciting. But we find that the response we get when we bring the horse to the door varies. Sometimes the children are very shy, and it makes sense. These are kids who have been, in situations where they don't trust strange grown-ups anymore. And it makes a lot of sense. So when a strange grown-up is showing up to their house and there's a horse, it's very confusing. 100% of the time, by the way, I mean, our team is so trained and so wonderful at making each child feel so special and comfortable. And by the end of the visit, they don't want to leave our side, and they're on that horse and they're so excited for their third or fourth horseback ride around the neighborhood. But the responses are all different. Sometimes the kids scream, sometimes they cry, sometimes they're a little bit more reserved. And that's what makes it so special. What I love about the Horsey House Call program particularly, and I should touch on our other programs too, because I will tell you that programs are just as special and just as beautiful, but Horsey House Call is really is so unique, and it is kind of what started it all. But what I love about the Horsey House Call program is that it's not just for the child going through treatment and the siblings. It really is the whole community. We hear oftentimes from the parents that we work with that their neighbors have started to retreat, that they feel very alone. At first, everybody is by their side when they have the diagnosis, but a cancer treatment is it's a lifelong battle, really. Even after there's no evidence of disease, there's always that underlying fear of it returning or relapse. And especially while the children are in active treatment, there are very unthinkable challenges that these families have to go through. And unless you are a trained social worker or just a natural empath, it can be an uncomfortable conversation to have with your neighbor or with an acquaintance. So something we hear from the parents oftentimes is that their neighbors, their next door neighbors, have started to retreat. They take the garbage out at different times strategically so they don't have to run into each other. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because we, in very, polite ways, we'll say to our neighbors, hey, how's it going? And if you are saying this to a mother who is terrified and struggling while her child is in the middle of a surgery or in the depths of hardship, you might not be prepared for the answer that that mother gives you. So we hear a lot from the families how appreciative they are that this opportunity to bring a horse and this very flashy horse trailer that is painted pink and purple and green and has helping kids with cancer just painted on its side. We are coming in with, to make a big deal out of the fact that this child has cancer, that this family is struggling, and that they need the support from the community. And we invite the whole neighborhood to get involved. So while the visit is meant for the child who's going through treatment, the brothers and sisters of that household, and they can invite 10 friends, we ask everybody on that block to come out and to support this family. And they do. We bring pizza for 60 people and it all gets eaten. And we bring crafts for everybody. And we bring games. We have music playing. And we have the spirit that is happening in that family's driveway or in their backyard is palpable. And it ends up being like a magnet for support from the neighborhood. And it becomes a block party. I mean, we will have 30, 40 kids at a house call that we specifically told the family, well, we can offer 10 rides, because the horse gets tired after an hour or two of giving rides. We bring t-shirts for everybody. It really does become a party and a way for the family to feel honored and celebrated and supported. The kids that we work with get bullied. I mean, kids who are not losing their hair and whose faces aren't bloating get bullied. So you can imagine how cruel children can be at the elementary, middle school, even high school level to a child who looks different. This child might walk differently, might have real physical impairments that stand out. And children can be terrible to one another and or they can just be ignorant to the fact that cancer is not contagious. It's not often that children are exposed to this, or it's not really a comfortable thing to talk about with your children. So I love that part of Camp Casey as much as I love the surprise and the fun and giving the rides and the educational experience that these children have and feeling empowered by being on this horse, or a child who is unable to walk, feeling as though she's now walking throughout the whole neighborhood. That's incredibly special, obviously. But there are all of these other parts to this program that make it so much more meaningful for the family to feel supported and that child to feel celebrated and being pointed out because she has a horse at her house and in her front yard and not because she has no hair. So there are just so many wonderful things. It's like this spiral of good. The volunteers that we have that are a part of our organization, we have over 500 volunteers that are really the heartbeat of our organization. They do so much. They give so much of their time and energy and love to support the families that we serve. And you'll hear from 100% of them that they get so much more out of it than what the kids are getting out of it. Like they really, truly feel like their cup is full after they leave a horsey house call visit. So I'm just beyond proud to see that this vision played out in this way. But I will tell you that I feel very much like I'm a cog in the machine at this point, because I truly believe that Camp Casey is guided and that I had no choice and that this is how it was going to work out. And our future is already sort of planned for us based on Casey and the army of angels now that we have rooting for this organization. And I'm just, it's just such an honor to be able to do this work. And I just feel so grateful that this is where everything ended up.
Donate to One Girl Revolution's nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, highlighting inspiring women and girls that are changing the world through their lives, promoting their work and their organizations, and building a powerful and positive force out in the world, dedicated to empowering women, their voices, and their stories. Donate at onegirlrevolution.com/donate. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com/donate. It's just so contagious. I loved what you were talking about, just the neighborhoods, and it's the magic feather for these kids or something just to make them feel special, which I think is so important because in this day and age, in this world, and especially when you're talking about cancer, or I know you also work with kids with rare blood disorders or other life-threatening illnesses, things that we don't know about or don't understand, a lot of times our impulse is to get away from it, and so these neighbors are like, I don't know what to say. And even my siblings and I, we recently went through a cancer journey with our mom, and she unfortunately passed away. But that was kind of our experience too, where it was like people were just trying their best. I always kind of gave people the benefit of the doubt, and I was like, they don't really know what to say. So then they don't end up saying anything. But I love that you're building the community for these kids and like giving them all something, the whole neighborhood, something to talk about and connect on. Like even all the little kids like, oh, remember that day when the horse came and we got to do all these cool crafts and blah, 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 blah. It's just awesome. I love it. And I want you to talk about, I know you talked about Horsey House Calls, but you have a couple other programs. Can you kind of run through those?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I want to say that I my heart goes out to you for losing your mom.
Oh, thank you.
You know, we see that cancer is not just, it's not only hyper focusing the hardships on that patient. It's almost more so the folks who love that patient, you know,
Right.
So what you've gone through, you can definitely relate to what the parents and the siblings and the friends and the grandparents feel of the children that we serve.
Yeah.
The Cowboy Campout program is one of our other signature programs that truly is meant to help the whole family. Sometimes we don't even know, we'll forget who the qualifying camper is, because it truly is for the whole family. All of the programs that we offer are for the child. The child qualifies the family, but it really is meant for the whole family. It's a family serving organization. But the Cowboy Campout is an opportunity for families to gather with each other and then 9 other families who are going through something similar. So like you touched on, we serve the cancer population, but we also heavily serve the sickle cell population. And we are very proud to have recently opened our parameters to serving all life-threatening illnesses. So if you are the parent or the sibling or the patient of somebody who is going through any life-threatening illness, you have that to relate to one another. Something else that you also have in common is you're probably not in a position to plan or pay for respite and some time away, even though ironically, this is the time when you most need that. So Camp Casey takes 20 families each summer. Twice a summer, we take 10 families. So in total, it's 20 families that we serve. But for a weekend in July, we invite 10 families to join us at a Dude Ranch resort. So we will essentially scholarship an entire family to come and to enjoy a very peaceful setting at a Dude Ranch where they are surrounded by 9 other families going through something similar. What's amazing is that it becomes a very unintended, I suppose would be the best word, support group, because we're not sitting around a campfire and saying, okay, now everybody, we're going to talk about cancer. We're going to talk about the hardships of having chronic illness. It just happens organically that all of the children start seeing that one child rips off her wig. And so the other child says, oh, this wig is hot. I'm going to rip mine off too. And it just becomes this beautiful circle of families who have this terrible thing in common, but it's something that they can bond over and relate to and help one another and give advice to each other, all while enjoying this respite and this experience to unplug and be in this gorgeous cabin in the middle of the woods that also, by the way, has like a kitchenette and a hot tub and a flat screen TVs. It's not like camping. It's more like glamping. I always have to differentiate that when I'm talking about the Cowboy Campout program. We're not pitching tents and sending our families in there. We're actually giving them this luxurious experience of glamping. And they get to go horseback riding and have bonfires and hay rides. And there's an indoor water park. And they just get to have an experience that most families, even those who are not struggling through terminal illness, would probably love to enjoy, but have a difficult time paying for. We take all of the expense and all of the planning away from the family, so they don't have to worry about the emotional weight that comes with figuring out vacation plans for the family. We basically tell them what to pack, where to show up. They can leave their money at home, and we take care of everything. It's a beautiful experience. So we offer the Cowboy Campout program twice a summer. We had to stop the Cowboy Campout during COVID because in many cases or during the height of the pandemic, I should say. I realize that COVID is far from leaving our worlds. But over the last 2 years, we did have to pause the Cowboy Campout program because sometimes it gathers upwards of 150 individuals, and to ask them to responsibly, socially distance while wanting to embrace one another is almost impossible. So in its place, though, we ended up, this is just the way Camp Casey works, is that a door closes and then another just like swings right open. Because if you can remember when the pandemic first kind of started, just flat out stopped all of our lives, it was in March, I believe. Well, by that time, the Cowboy Campout was fully booked and fully funded. It's an expensive program to put on. And again, all of Camp Casey services are completely free to the families that we serve. So we already had the 20 families signed up. They already were ready to go. We already had the donors who had committed to providing the funds for this experience for these 20 families. But the problem was we didn't know how we would responsibly send them on these vacations together, especially during a time that we didn't understand nearly as much as we know now about COVID. We just knew that this was dangerous to do and that we could not responsibly do this. So we knew to pause this program. In its place, we ended up as a Band-Aid, as a temporary fix, which I have to emphasize this because you're probably predicting this ended up not being a temporary fix. Now it's one of our signature programs. We started the Lone Star Getaway program. And this is where we took those 20 families that were signed up to all go on this experience together. We sent them on individual trips. So we ended up connecting with folks who were owners of vacation properties through VRBO, through Airbnb, some folks who just happened to have a private vacation home on Lake Michigan. And we asked if they would generously give us whatever discount they could to send our families to their vacation home. And we took the 20 families that were supposed to enjoy this experience together, and we sent them on individual trips. Well, that ended up being so much fun and such a success that we are now operating both Cowboy Campouts and the Lone Star Getaway program. So again, it just goes to show that you can make all sorts of plans, and they can be interrupted in all sorts of different ways, whether it be a nosebleed or a pandemic. But there's always a way to figure out how to accomplish the goal that you have in mind, but maybe go a different direction in obtaining that goal. And the Lone Star Getaway program is a true testament to that. And I'm very excited about the Lone Star Getaway program because it was created out of desperation, and it ended up turning into something so beautiful and really became a silver lining that we were able to take from the pandemic. So the Outlaw Outing program it's more of a supplemental program. What started happening was that we would serve a family with a Cowboy Campout, and this is an expensive experience, not for the family, but for Camp Casey. So we have to raise quite a bit of money to send families, and we always joke that the families we serve, sometimes there's like a clown car, there are like 9 kids coming out. We'll serve everybody in the household. So it can be very expensive to serve everybody who's living in that household with this vacation. So we'll serve the family, and then they'll have such a wonderful experience, and then they'll apply again to have it. And unfortunately, because what we do is expensive and because the demand outweighs our resources, we can only serve a family with a horsey house call or a Cowboy Campout or now a Lone Star Getaway one time. So they have the choice. They can enjoy any of the 3 services, but they can only do it once. They cannot have endless Cowboy Campout experiences. But we didn't want to say like, see you never, after we had this wonderful, beautiful experience where the family allows us into this very private and sacred time of their lives. And, it was very hard for us to have this joyful time with them and then say goodbye and know we'd never see them again because we can't serve them a second time. So as a way to retain the relationships with the families we previously served, and as a way to reunite with these families, and so that maybe these little girls can show off, like, look at my hair. When you saw me last, I didn't have any hair. And now I have luscious locks, as a way to keep that relationship alive. We had created the Outlaw Outing Program. And this provides one-day recreational experiences for families to enjoy on a year-round basis. So for example, we will offer experiences to go on a trail ride with us, or to the spa. We have spa days for moms and daughters to enjoy. We'll take families to sit almost courtside at a Pistons game. We'll take them to pumpkin patches or apple orchards and things like that, just to give families a day of recreation and the opportunity to return. And what's really nice too is that there's so many families that come to these outlaw outing events, and they're all in various stages of treatment. So some we served 10 years ago, others we served 6 months ago. And it gives the families who were served 6 months ago to see the families that were served 10 years ago. And it gives them that hope and that inspiration and that encouragement that you will get through this. And one day you will be at the bowling alley with a bunch of Camp Casey alum, and now your child is the one with the long hair. So it's a really special program that we hope to just continue to grow and maintain.
It's just building community. That's what I love so much about all the different aspects of what you're doing. You're making people feel like they're not alone. And I think one thing about cancer or any of the other things that you're dealing with is a lot of times it can feel so isolating for the kid or for the person who's going through it, but also for their families. And so helping them see that they're not alone, and that other people have been through it or are going through it, or it just gives them hope, And I think that that's so important, and just people cheering them on and saying, you can do it too. And I'm sure the kids, there's some of that camaraderie where it's like, I did it, and look at me, and like, look at my hair, like you said. And it gives those kids hope and helps them not feel so alone, which is amazing.
Yeah. I love overhearing some of the conversations that happen among the children who are in different stages of their treatment. I remember this one little girl, and I love this because you just have to chuckle because this is just out of, the mouths of children. But I overheard her talking to another little boy, and they were doing a craft together. And she's like, having cancer can be really hard. She's like, but there are just so many perks. And I just remember thinking, if that is the attitude that this little girl has, we've done our job correctly. We've done it right. If she can walk away thinking, wow, there's so many perks to this situation, we succeeded.
Yeah. Get cancer and a horse might show up at your house,
Right. It can be any horse. It doesn't have to be the one you brought,
Molly, how do you get connected to the kids and the families? And I'm thinking about if there are people even that are listening that know of a kid or a family who's going through cancer or one of these disorders. How do they get connected to you?
Thank you for asking that, because that's something that surprises most people when they learn of our need. Obviously, we're always looking for funds because what we do is expensive, and we always need, where a fundraiser ends, another one begins. We are constantly knocking down doors to have our programs funded. However, the harder part of what we do is leveraging the families that we serve. And it's because I can call any Tom, Dick, and Harry and ask for money. I cannot call anybody and ask if their child has cancer. There are hospital privacy laws that really prohibit us from being given a list. As much as the pediatric oncology doctors and nurses and social workers would love to just hand over contact information of their patients, they can't, rightfully so. So we have to go through a great deal of just being creative and trying to market and advertise and use word of mouth to become the most well-known organization that we can be, so that the families know that we are there and that they can benefit from what we do. So we work very closely, of course, with the health systems locally, and we serve children in every pediatric hematology oncology center in all of Michigan. So if there's a child in Traverse City, we have a program for them. If there's a child anywhere in Detroit, Ann Arbor, St. Clair Shores, wherever it may be, we have a program that is available for that child. So of course, the social workers and the pediatric oncology staff know all about us, and we have flyers all over there. But truly what we rely on is word of mouth. We rely on folks sharing Camp Casey's mission on their social media pages, telling friends about what we do, because the most successful way that we are able to reach the families that can benefit from our services is by somebody telling somebody else about Camp Casey and having them come to us. That is something that oftentimes people are so surprised to hear, that we don't have just like waiting lists of children waiting to serve. We do, of course, reach all of our numbers. We never have a problem filling all of the visits that we have time to fill, and all of the filling all the spots for the Cowboy Camp Out and Lone Star Getaway programs. But it's not without having to advertise quite a bit, ask folks to share our mission on their social media pages. If you see a child or know of a parent who has a child who's going through a life-threatening illness, to tell them about Camp Casey and nominate them. There are no hospital privacy laws that prohibit, a neighbor from emailing us and nominating that family. So we are very well trained and well versed at approaching the family. So if one of your listeners knows somebody, or maybe goes to church or synagogue, or sees at the community center there is somebody that has a child going through a life-threatening illness, even if you are uncomfortable approaching that family, if you would like, send their information to us. We are happy to very respectfully approach that family. And to be honest, 0 times have we ever reached out to one of the families that's been nominated to us and told them about what we have to offer them, and they've said, no way. 100% of the time they say, wow, that exists? You'll do that for us? Yes. So the demand is there. The interest is there. It's just that we're yet a household name. I'm very proud that we are now 18 years old, but we are far from becoming one of the more well-known organizations. And so we have quite a bit to do. And we rely a lot on our network of volunteers and supporters to help spread the word, because unfortunately our advertising and marketing budget is pretty much nothing. So we rely on our community to help make that happen for us.
Well, I want to encourage all of our listeners to follow you guys on social media, share your posts. I always say that is a free and easy way that we can support, even if we can't donate financially. But of course, they can donate to your programs, volunteer if they're local or they're interested in volunteering, reaching out. But like you said, I love that you can even just call you or email you and let you know about a family that might need Camp Casey, and you can do the work of that. Because I think a lot of times people, like we talked about before, can be awkward and not know what to say or how to say it. And Camp Casey is ready to reach out to them.
Yes. And I love that you touched on volunteering. We're always looking for 3 things. That's something that our team is constantly talking about: funds, campers, and volunteers. To volunteer with Camp Casey, it's super easy. We've made it as turnkey and as convenient on the volunteers as possible, mostly because we require so many volunteers to do what we do. At every Horsey House call, which again happened 2 to 3 times a week through our peak programming season, at each visit, it requires 5 volunteers. And you don't have to be horse savvy to be a part of what we do. So you just need to be over the age of 15 years old and have a clean background check. We do background check. We always make the joke. We say, we don't want like real outlaws. Like, we're all Western themed and everything, but no real outlaws, please. But as long as you will pass a background check that we run and you are of age and have reliable transportation, it's about a 2.5-hour commitment. So once you go through our application process and pass the vetting process that we do on the internal end, then we will invite you to show up to the Horsey House Call location that's convenient to where you live, convenient to your summer schedule. You stay for 2.5 hours. You can help by, if you don't know a thing about horses, or maybe are even a little nervous around horses, then you can be the craft king or queen, or help us set up the craft station and help facilitate the pizza lunch service. We also need sidewalkers to walk alongside some of our kids. So of course, we always are looking for horse happy folks too, but we need volunteers. So if you yourself as an individual want to volunteer, or as a family or your business or your company wants to sponsor 5 of you to come out, we would love to encourage anybody and everybody to consider volunteering with Camp Casey, because we need all of the help we can get. And truly, it's a convenient, easy, and super fun way to get involved in your community.
Molly, I know that you've worked with so many kids through the years and you've shared different stories that, funny stories and cute stories and different things. But is there a story that really touched your heart? And maybe it was a kid that when you were having a really rough time and thinking, why am I doing this? I need to stop doing Camp Casey, something that just kind of put a spark in you to keep going.
Gosh, well, it's so funny. First of all, you're asking me to like pick a favorite child. Like, it's like
right.
Every visit, I walk away with something that I just have been inspired by that child or that family in particular. I could keep you here for days to tell you about the different individual stories I have. And it's funny that you mentioned, wanting to give up and then something like that happens. That happens 100% of the time, anytime, because of course it's not always playing with horses and kids and having fun. And there's a great deal of administrative like headaches that I have to go through all of the time that I'm like, oh, I'm ready. I'm ready to hang up my hat. Somebody else can take over now. But it seems to always be in those moments that I am just at my most stressed out that something wonderful will happen that reignites the energy and recharges my battery. One case I love to talk about relates to the bullying that these children endure. And that was when one of the moms asked us to come because the day can be totally tailored around the child's day, schedule, family events. So she asked us to come at 3:32 on a Thursday. And it was just so odd because she was so specific about what time she wanted us to arrive. And it turned out that the child had been getting terribly bullied on the bus. And so she wanted the bus to pull up right as the horse was there. So to show these little jerks on the bus, look how cool. That's one of those stories that I felt very wow, this is really neat that we're able to play a role in this child feeling special and to help him combat the hardships he was going through on a totally other level. But there was a little girl named Ashley. This was very much during the early days of Horsey House Calls. And she loved horses so much. Once in a while, we'll get we love introducing the children to a love of horses, but once in a while we'll visit children who actually love horses so much. And in this case, she, I think her family got in touch with us during the winter, and we didn't have the Horsey House Call program up and running during the winter time. So one of our volunteers, Amy, used to give this little girl, Ashley, horseback riding lessons. And it was just out of the goodness of her heart. So she said, hey, until Horsey House Calls happens, come to the barn and we'll give you a ride. She'll give you a riding lesson. So on a weekly basis, Amy donated her time to give this little girl, Ashley, horseback riding lessons. And she ended up just fostering Ashley's love for horses. And she just loved it so much. She got very, very sick. And she ended up, we were told by her social worker that the end was near. And I want to say it was in November, the snow was coming down. And we had heard that she was just not going to make it. So we ended up loading up her favorite horse that she used to ride in her lesson. And we brought it to her house, and she was so sick. There was no way she could even ride, but she opened the door, and we have a video of it. And it's just so touching because she just burst out crying. It's really emotional to even think about, but I'll never forget that because it just made us feel wow, this little girl, she knew that she was dying. And it was this visit from her friend that all of us were just, we were all just bawling. And usually they're not sad. I want to say that, right? Of course, after I piggyback, trying to encourage folks to volunteer with us, usually it's very happy. That's something we hear all the time. I don't think I could ever do that because I'm too sad, but it's we're not in the hospital administering their chemo. We're giving them this awesome day, and they're definitely having a good time and being celebrated at the party. But for Ashley's case, it was actually quite somber day because it was her time to say goodbye to this horse. So I'm sorry, I feel so embarrassed and I'm crying over that. But I think of her all the time. And that was a long time ago. That was probably in 2008 or so. But I think of Ashley all the time and just how meaningful this connection was that she had with this horse and with our team. And just how special that day was now for everybody here, and also for her family and the memories that she was able to get from that. So it was, but I have a lot of other fun stories too.
Yeah. But I think it's just it's just the reality of life, right? There are going to be difficult moments. And I'm sure in your work, there can be really difficult moments or really tragic and heartbreaking stories. And, you're watching these families go through such difficult things. You're watching children suffering. I think one of the most tragic things in the world is children suffering and knowing that you can't do anything to help them. And that's the frustrating thing about cancers, because there are, of course, a lot of amazing medical advances, and so many children are able to be helped. And even the power of the things that you're doing with Camp Casey, a lot of things are just like mind over matter. If you can feel happy, even though you're going through chemo and feel terrible and are being bullied at school and all the different things that these kids are going through, the reality is there are going to be really difficult moments, but it's just such a testament to the work that you're doing with Camp Casey and bringing light to these kids, bringing light to the family, bringing community, helping them not feel alone. And I just think it's so incredible what you're doing. And I can't wait to see where Camp Casey goes from here. And I know you've impacted so many lives of these children and their families, and that will just continue to grow and evolve. But I'm dying to know, Molly, where do you go from here in your dream of dream worlds over the next 5 or 10 years? I know that there's so much potential. There's so much work to be done. But where do you hope that Camp Casey goes from here?
So in Camp Casey fashion, it does seem that the challenges that we face end up paving the way for what's next, because it always seems that we're trying to figure out what the solution is to the biggest challenge that we're facing. And this organization has grown from absolutely nothing. Like I said, there was a time where it was, we were indebted to my parents' emergency credit card. So it was, and now we are finally in a place where we're more stable, we're more successful. Each year we increase the number of families that we served from the previous year, and we're able to net a little bit more at the end of our financial year. So we're in a financially healthier state now than we ever were. So it used to be that we would work our tushes off all winter long to fundraise, spend every last penny all throughout our programming season, it used to be just the summertime. Then it extended to spring and summertime. Then it was spring, summertime, fall. So the season has been able to increase because we haven't had as much of the need to just do nothing but fundraise. So what I'm trying to say is that our bank account is not at zero by the time that we are completed with our programming season. So our hope is that we can continue to extend that season longer and longer. Now, of course, Camp Casey operates in a very lean way. We have an office in Farmington Hills. We have different horses stationed all throughout Michigan that we take for they're called the Hero Herd, that we take for the Horsey House Call program. We operate out of different Dude Ranch resorts for our Cowboy Campout program. We rely on lots of different partners to operate the Outlaw Outing program, but we don't have a home base. We joke that Camp Casey is everywhere because we are this mobile program. So we have a small little office in Farmington Hills where we do all of our fundraising and administrative and application processing. But our true hope is one day to be able to program during the winter months, because we are faced with Michigan winters. So we cannot operate the Horsey House Call program in the wintertime, nor would it be as fun to send families on their vacations during the wintertime. Our hope is one day to have our own home. We are working hard to create a strategic plan to get us there one day, to have a place where on a year-round basis, families who are struggling through the hardship of life-threatening illness can find respite. So, because unfortunately, in fact, we're going out this Sunday. It's an emergent situation. The child is likely not going to be here by the spring. So we can do it. We're going to be bundling up. Instead of bringing soda and juice, we're bringing hot cocoa and with our pizza. But So we'll make it work, but it definitely would be so much nicer to be able to invite this family to our own facility. So we're working on that. We also have a beautiful collaboration happening with our friends at a different nonprofit organization in Detroit. It's called the Buffalo Soldiers Heritage Association. It's where 2 of our horses live that are part of our hero herd. There is an abandoned building that steps from their barn that we are hoping that we can collaborate with a few other nonprofits to create a communal workspace for all of us who provide recreation in this particular area of Detroit. Our long-term hope is to collaborate to build an indoor riding arena on that property so that we can make 1 and 1 equal 3 in lots of different ways by having the horses from the Buffalo Soldiers program with Camp Casey kids in Rouge Park, which is where the Buffalo Soldiers is situated. So we're working on that while working on eventually having our own Camp Casey Ranch to call our own one day.
That's incredible. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. And it's just been beautiful to hear all about the evolution of it, how it started and like how it's just grown and evolved. And I really can't wait to see where it goes from here. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and finding ways that One Girl can support the work that you're doing. And everybody who's listening, again, I hope that they follow you, donate, volunteer, share everything on social media. Let's help spread awareness about Camp Casey. Before I let you go, Molly, I have 2 final questions for you. One is, you're a One Girl Revolution to me. That's why I wanted to have you on. I know that Casey is a big part of that story. She is a One Girl Revolution as well. Who's a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who's a woman or girl that inspires you?
I find that everybody inspires me in so many different ways. I mean, I could say like, the girl who cuts my hair and the stories she has to tell, and, my next door neighbor, or the little girl, Ashley, who I was telling you about, who was so emotionally touched by our visit. I have 2, if I'm going to have to narrow it down. I really could go on, and I could give you like the, Michelle Obama. There's so many people who inspire me.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, there's one particular volunteer who's been volunteering with us for at least 15 years. And she herself is a cancer survivor. Her name is Ashley Goldberg, and she had osteosarcoma as a child. So she has a disability. When she walks, you can tell there was something that is a little bit different about her. And she does not care at all about that. And she doesn't let it stop her one bit. She is always the first to sign up to volunteer with us. Lots of times at our fundraising events, she wants to sell raffle tickets, and she loves going up to crowds and schmoozing with them and sharing her personal experience about growing up with cancer and why programs like Camp Casey are important. She also started her own yoga studio for children, which I love that somebody who has a physical disability is breaking that barrier and out there sharing her love of fitness and with children and inspiring them in so many ways. So I look at her as somebody I would say definitely inspires me. Another young woman who works with Camp Casey as a supporter and also as an equine therapist and just an all-around friend is my friend, I call her Kalili Smith. She was Michigan State University's first Black rodeo queen. She is a rodeo rider. She's African American, which is breaking all sorts of barriers there in the rodeo world. She is somebody who is continuously out in the community, inspiring little girls that might have aspirations that they don't even know could be something that they can do what they set their mind to do. And she's somebody that has been a really big part of helping us bridge the gap with the African American riding community and having a lot more volunteers come onto our crew that oftentimes the sickle cell kids that we serve can look up to and relate to. So Lily is somebody who I would absolutely say inspires me, and I just think she's such a badass. I just like love that she is this rodeo queen from Detroit who is breaking all of the barriers that I think need to be broken.
She sounds amazing. I remember when you told me about her on the phone and I was like, I need to meet her. She's just amazing. But I'm just so grateful to spend this time with you, Molly. I can't wait to follow everything that you're doing with Camp Casey. Before I let you go, I always end this podcast on one question because we're focused on women and girls. If you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I would say you are the company you keep. Surround yourself with other inspiring people who make you better. When you start feeling that tinge of jealousy or envy, turn it into admiration and just know that you can always learn something from somebody else and just be open to going after what you want because there's always a way to get it. All you really need is to be confident, disciplined, tenacious, and passionate. Truly. So I would say surround yourself with really good people.
That's such great advice, I think, for all women, people that are going to raise you up, lift you up, support you in all the things that you're doing, whether it's starting an organization like you did or just striving for something in your career or your life, but just surrounding yourself with people that are going to support you. Molly, you are such a gift. I'm so grateful to be connected with you. Thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you. It's truly an honor.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.